Well, thank you very much for inviting us to the studios, David.
No problem.
It's a real pleasure and a treat and a privilege to be here. We have actually met once before, about 26 years ago.
Blimey. Where was that then?
So I don't know, because at the time I didn't really know the hour. It was near around Brighton. It was a funny time because I just read The Truth Will Set You Free, and that was the catalyst. It was life changing for me.
Yeah, well, how I got into this was, obviously, I've told the story many times about Betty Shine. Actually near Brighton.
Right.
And I went to see her synchronistic events, and she told me I was going to go out on a world stage, Betty Shine being a psychic, of course, and reveal great secrets.
Yeah.
When she was telling me all this, the next thing I was going to do after I left her house was get on a train to London to present a sports program, right? So I was a sports presenter with the BBC. So I should, when she was telling me all this, all of which has happened, I should have gone, that's crazy. But part of me said, you've got to go with this. You've got to go with this. And I started getting into you call it the spiritual side.
Yeah.
The kind of nature of reality side. What is this place? Who am I?
Yeah.
Where am I? And what I find is people come into the arena of, quote, conspiracy. In other words, how the world's not controlled by the people we are told it is.
Yeah.
And the goals of that force that's manipulating from the background. They come into it in different ways. Some will come in from the UFO
Sure. Yeah.
side. They'll investigate, UFOs and stuff and UFO reports, and they'll look at the suppression of those reports, and they think, well, who's suppressing this and why?
Yeah.
And that will lead them into the bigger conspiracy. And others come in through different routes. I came in it through the realization that there are other explanations for life and reality that actually are not talked about in the mainstream. And so my question was, so why isn't this stuff taught in the schools? Why isn't this widely circulated and debated? And that takes you into the wider conspiracy, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, this conspiracy I've uncovered now is just enormous. But so that's how I really got into it. And
Were there sort of inklings before the Betty Shine incident, and when what were you like as a child? Can you recognise the you that you are now?
Oh yeah, absolutely. When I was a kid, I did not respect authority because it was authority.
Yeah.
Never did. You command my respect by your actions and what you say.
Yeah.
Then fine, I'm no problem. But you tell me I'm going to do this or do that, just because you say it, I'm sorry, I'm not having it.
Yeah.
So I've always been like that. And
was that something that your parents?
I was a bit of a rebel at school. Yeah. Well, my father was my father, Beric, his name was. He's the only Beric I've ever known.
Yeah, I did not know either.
Beric.
Right.
And he had a hell of a life. I mean, he was born in 1907. And so he was 7 when the First World War started.
Right.
Lived through that. Then lived through the Great Depression that followed. And then worked in the medical corps in the military during the Second World War. And came back home, and I arrived in 1952, and we were absolutely skint. I mean, just skint, hand to mouth. I mean, one of the earliest memories I have is going round the back of the Gents Clock Factory in Leicester, with my mother on a Thursday lunchtime so he could nip out the back so people wouldn't know and give us his pay packet so that we could eat that night.
Right.
That's what it was like.
Yeah.
And, you know, I remember when I was a small kid, I wasn't even at school, and the door would knock sometimes, and my mother would grab me, and you know, if we were in the front room, she'd get me down behind the settee. I didn't know what was going on.
Right.
But what it was the rent man knocked the door, and she knew that if no one answered, he would walk along and look in the front window. Yeah. So it was like shh, behind the settee. So that was how I was, you know, I was brought up. But the thing is, when you're born into something like that, you kind of get used to it. Kind of your normal. Yeah. And I didn't actually feel deprived or anything. You know, I didn't think, the world's against me. It's not fair. It was just the way it was. You know. Yeah. But in those early years, maybe because of my upbringing, maybe because of the circumstances, I don't know. But I was a very diffident kid. You know. To
the other children around you? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. I used to spend a lot of time alone. Right. Playing with little metal trains on the windowsill, completely in my own world. And I just, you know, went to school, in primary school, infant school. Yeah. In fact, the first time I went to infant school, I went in the morning. My mother took me, and Whitehall Infant School it was in Leicester. And I thought, I don't like this. So at lunchtime, I went home. And my mother told me I had to go back. I was gutted because it was so freaking boring. I said, I want to go down the shops with you like I'd always do, you know. But I was a diffident kid, and my perception was the best things in life happen to other people, right? And then
you did feel like that. You felt,
in those days, the very early years, yeah, absolutely, I did. You know, because that was my experience. Yeah. But what changed it was when I was at primary school, I was in the third year of primary school, and again, I'm still in
about 8.
Yeah, what would I be? I don't know what I'd be then.
7 or 8.
I was still in the mode of, you know, the best things in life happen to other people. And I just got on with my life and, you know, played with my trains. And then I remember walking up the steps into the school after playtime one day. And there was this notice on the board, and it said, anyone that wants a trial for the third year football team, put your name down. And of course, I never did, because, I ain't going to get in, am I? Right. Right? And what was happening is that every playtime, we used to play a football game called uppers and downers. Yeah. Because the playground was on a slight slope, top to bottom. So someone kicked the ball in the air, and then people decided if they want to kick up or kick down for the uppers or the downers. And I always wanted to go in goal. I guess to a certain extent that was part of my personality that's continued to this day. You know, a goalkeeper is in a football team, but they're different. They don't do it like everyone else. They have a completely different skill set and everything. So I was always attracted to going goal. So anyway, I looked at this notice and thought, no, I'll never get in there. Me? And then I'm walking home a couple of nights later on my own, and I heard this kid behind me say, Icke, Icke. And I turned around, and this guy was running after me, this kid was running after me, and he said, Mr. Rickard, who was the school teacher running the football team, wants you to have a trial tomorrow, right? Mm-hmm. Because my name wasn't on, you see. And I thought, me, a trial? And okay, so then I thought, well, I've got no boots. you know. I only had one pair of shoes.
Yeah.
Never mind, still have, but literally still have. But the thing was that I had no boots, so I waited, excited, till my father came home.
Yeah. Just
after 5 o'clock, to tell him I was going to have a trial, and I hadn't got any boots. And in those days, you see, I remember the first. I think it was bigger than just Leicester, but it was the first supermarket built in Leicester. I think it was one of the first.
Right.
Tesco's.
Yeah.
Built in Leicester, and that was a few years later. At the time of needing football boots, shops shut at 5 o'clock. That was it. Sunday, nothing opened.
Yeah, right? That's right.
Day of rest and all that.
Yeah, yeah.
So
because Sundays were dull. Weren't they?
I had to go to school the next morning with my football boots. So I said to my father, I need some boots. And it's gone 5 o'clock. Yeah. So anyway, we go down to this place called Green Lane Road, which is, about 20 minutes walk from my house. And we're looking at all the shops, and they're all shut. And there was this one shop. It was an old bric-a-brac shop where they sold, but basically they bought and sold crap, basically. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those shops that, hadn't had anything done to it since the 1920s kind of thing,
Yeah.
And there, in the front of the window, were these football boots. Except they weren't really football boots. They were like divers' boots, right? They'd have been state of the art in about 1910, mm-hmm. maybe 1880 even. And they were massive. They're far bigger than my feet, obviously. Massive adults.
Yeah.
And they had a massive toe cap on the front, which was rock hard, mm-hmm. right? So I think he paid something like 7 and 6 for them in old money. Seems to come into my mind. And so I went on the trial the next night after school. And I went as a goalkeeper, but I didn't get in as a goalkeeper because they had another lad. So at the end of the trial, it was between me and another kid over whether I got in the team as an outfield player. And he said, "What we're going to do, Mr. Rickard," he said, "we're going to have shots at goal, and the one with the hardest shot gets in the team, right?" Well, mm-hmm. the other kid, poor sod, he had no chance, did he? I had these massive toe caps, right?
Cap, yeah.
It was like an exocet missile.
Toe poked it in.
Right.
Yeah.
So I smacked it with my toe cap, and of course it went.
Yeah.
And I got in the team, and I scored. I scored in my first game, which doesn't say a lot because we played the Newry, which were a Roman Catholic school, and it's the funniest thing I've ever seen because wherever the ball went, 10 of their players went. I was surprised the goalkeeper didn't go as well. Wherever the ball went, it was surrounded by their entire team.
Yeah.
They were clueless. We beat them 16-0, I remember. And I don't know, 2 weeks later maybe, the goalkeeper who got in this went into the 4th-year team, and I got in the 3rd-year team as a goalkeeper. And that whole experience of just quite a short time completely transformed my attitude to life.
Right.
Suddenly, the best things in life didn't always happen to other people.
Yeah.
And I decided then, as a 3rd year at junior school, I was going to be a professional footballer. That was what was going to happen. And so right up, career teachers were saying, okay, so what do you think you're going to do as a career when you leave school? I said, I'm going to be a professional footballer. And they go, yeah, right,
Yeah, sure.
I said, well, I'm not. I'm going to be. But I went on to another school, this senior school called Crown Hills, and I was supposed to go to another school, but they only played rugby, and I got special dispensation. A group of us did actually, out of the the Whitehall primary school team, and we went to Crown Hills. And, you know, if you're going to be a professional footballer, then you've got to play for your city team, at least. Well, in those days, anyway. Yeah. Because the scouts weren't looking at school matches, obviously. They wanted to see kids who were in the city or county representative level, because that obviously where you're going to be quite good, so we'll have a look at you. And nothing was happening at all. I was playing for the school team, but nothing was happening. And what was happening at that time in Leicester was there was a kid called Dave Valance, and he was under 14 by age, but he was already in the under 15 Leicester schools team.
Yeah.
And so it was taken as read that he was going to get into the under 14 team. I mean, of course he would, right?
Sure, yeah.
So my teacher, sports teacher, said to me, I'm going to send you for a trial with the Leicester under 14s it was, but I'm going to send you as an outfield player because you're not going to get as a goalkeeper because of Dave Valance, right?
Yeah, sure.
It's okay. So I remember going to this trial on a very cold, damp, very heavy, really heavy, dewy morning. And they had a little half an hour games where they were watching for the players. And I played outfield and I was crap. And I was crap for a simple reason. My heart wasn't in it.
Right.
I don't want to be an outfield player. I'm a goalkeeper.
Yeah.
So anyway, at the end of the first half an hour, the teacher said, the manager kind of guy said, okay, there was me and two other kids. He said, well, you go and take a ball onto the other pitch, and if we need you again, we'll call you. Okay, thanks, but no thanks. So I kind of wandered away with these kids thinking, well, how am I going to be a professional footballer, you know? And then maybe 10 minutes later, I heard a shout, and it was the manager. Hey, he said, any of you lads playing goal? And what had happened, there was two goalkeepers, Valance and another one, and the other one had got injured.
Right.
And of course, as soon as the question came, I'm on my way. Yeah. They've got no chance, the other two, right? They weren't goalkeepers anyway. And so I was down there, and I played in that trial in goal, and I did all right, right? And the manager came to me afterwards, and he said, we need a reserve for Dave Valance, he said, so we're going to bring you to the next trial, right? Which was the trial that they then picked the whole team from.
Yeah.
And I went to that trial, and I don't know who picked the teams, but they obviously didn't know the players because it was an extraordinary mismatch. My team had the worst players in the trial, and the other team had all the best ones, right? And Valance played in the other goal.
Yeah.
Never touched the ball, as I remember. And
you were kept busy.
It was one of those days where if I'd have dived the wrong way, it would have hit me toe and gone over the bar. You know what I mean? I could not fail to stop everything that was thrown at me. It was, I mean, it was probably the best game I'd ever had in my life, even right up to when my career finished.
Uh-huh.
And to be fair, the manager said to me afterwards, he says, look, he said, I've got to pick the best goalkeeper on what I've seen in the trial, so you're going in the team, right?
Yeah.
So I was in the under 14 team, and the under 15 goalkeeper couldn't get in it. And then the next year I got into the under 15 team in front of him, and scouts came, quite a lot of scouts started looking at me and offering me trials and stuff. And I ended up signing for Coventry City. But that goalkeeper getting injured was absolutely pivotal in me becoming a professional footballer.
Yeah.
Had that not happened, it probably wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. Do you think? I mean, there's questions. There's films been made about that. You know, what if you take one route? But do you feel, you know, in some respects, you would have ended up in a similar place anyway, regardless. You know, because we have this sort of not a destiny, but
Well,
necessarily.
I think you can look at destiny in many different ways.
Yeah.
But certainly, if I had have not got into that Leicester under 14s team, I almost certainly would not have got in the under 15s team because Valence would have been
Sure. Yeah.
completely
Yeah.
dominating that position. And it was when I got in the under. Well, it was only about 2-3 games in the under 14 Leicester team before I was offered a trial at Arsenal.
Oh, okay.
And I was on trial at Arsenal for a while, and they offered me they wanted me to sign for them, but my father was hesitant. He wanted me to hold on, and he was right in the end. So it was only about 3 weeks later I got offered that trial with Arsenal. Would never have happened because without the goalkeeper getting injured, because I wouldn't have even been there, right? Yeah. Same with the under 15 team when all the scouts started coming after me. Maybe it would have happened, but it would have been a very circuitous route. Given that, so you can look at a certain, I don't know, you call it destiny. It sounds a bit grand, but certain things happen that basically put you down the right channel in the maze. Yeah. And that situation was pivotal in what happened and what followed. And of course, by the time I was in the under 15s, I played for Leicester Boys and I played for the Leicester County team. I mean, I only had to turn up and I was going to be in the team because, you know, I was good at what I did, and there was a big gap between me and the rest of the kids, goalkeepers in Leicestershire at that time. And therefore, you know, my confidence really started to build and what have you. The difference is that when I left school and went to play for Coventry City at the age of 15, it's a completely different game then. Yeah. Because now you're not, you know, significantly better than the opposition. You know, there's people who are better than you are, right? Sure. Yeah. And there's people that want to be professionals and make it just as much as you do. Yeah. So it became a completely different game then, and I think a lot of the joy. I mean, there were great moments when I played for Coventry, like getting to the FA Youth Cup final in 1970 against Tottenham, with Graham Souness was in their team. Okay. And quite a few others. A guy called Steve Perriman, who became a big player with Spurs. Spurs, yeah. Dennis Mortimer was in our team, who was captain of Aston Villa when they won the European Cup. So, you know, there were great moments, but a lot of the joy went out of it because it was fiercely competitive. Did that not sit with you? Were you not particularly competitive? Oh, I was very competitive. You were competitive. I'm not anymore. Right. I've been competitive for a long time. Yeah. I just do what I do, and it is what it is. But I was very competitive in those days. Yeah. Well, I wasn't a competitive personality in that I wanted to win at everything. Yeah. I wanted to win and be successful at what I wanted to win and be successful about. Yeah. The rest of it, I don't care. You know. Yeah. I mean, you know, I don't sit in a pub quiz going, got to win, got to win. Yeah. I couldn't care frickin' less. Man. Yeah. And I couldn't care less then. But when I had a goal, I went for it. Yeah. And that was something that stayed with me through football, through journalism, through television, etc. And when you sort of achieved success at a relatively early age, presumably financially became a little bit more comfortable. I didn't. Oh, you didn't? It didn't work like that? Are you joking? I mean, I know we're talking 70s. Oh dear. But, presumably, did you not have a steady wage? No, when I joined Coventry at 15, yeah, I joined as what they call an apprentice professional. I don't think they have that now. Yeah. But it was an apprentice professional. And anyone listening to this who plays for a top team and is a youngster now, like 15, 16, 17, they will reel back and go, "You're joking," because of the money they get paid now at that age. But my first year's wage was £8 a week, plus me digs. They pay me digs as well.
Okay. £8. What would that be? 100 quid?
No, I wouldn't think so. Not even that. No, eight, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. Inflation's you know.
I suppose it has, yeah. But £8 a week anyway. And this is in 1967. £8 a week. 1968, it was £10 a week. And then I signed full professional at 18, and it was £18 a week, but I had to pay my own digs. So it went a lot better, really.
Right, okay.
So that was me. The most I ever earned in football was at Hereford United, and that was £33 a week.
The most you earned was at Hereford?
Yeah, that was £33 a week. But in those days, you used to get crowd bonus. Like if you played at home in front of a crowd of a certain number, you got extra money.
Yeah.
You got win bonus, and draw bonus and all that stuff. And we were very, very successful at Hereford that season, my last season in football. I was 19, 20. And I'd left Coventry because I was told I'd never play again. I shouldn't play again because I had rheumatoid arthritis.
Ah, of course, yeah.
And I thought that was when I was, 19.
Right. I didn't realise you were so young. I thought it was a bit later
19,
on.
yeah.
Okay.
And so then there was a guy, he was a director at Coventry City called John Campkin. He ran a chain of travel agents. And we had a chat every now and again, you know, when he was director and I was playing for Coventry. And then when my career ended at Coventry and it was in the papers and stuff, in local papers, that I couldn't play again, he called me and he said, you know, what do you want to do? And John Campkin was also a journalist, sports journalist on the old News Chronicle and the Daily Mail.
Yeah.
And he also did some football commentary for ITV. And anyway, he said, what do you want to do? I said, look, I ain't given up yet. I said, I still want to play. So he said, I'll make a few calls, right? So he came back to me a few days later and he said, I've had a word with John Charles. John Charles was a very famous footballer, Welsh footballer. He went to Juventus. He was known as the Gentle Giant. He was massive.
Right.
And he was a really nice man. And he was manager of Hereford United. And so they asked me if I wanted to go down and you know, train with them and see what would happen. And I went down and they asked me to sign eventually. So I played for them. And we eventually, the next season we got in the Football League. We were in the Southern League then, as it was then called. And because I thought if I play for a part-time club, then maybe I'll get away with it. And then we got in the league and what have you.
Yeah.
And we were very successful. So, you know, my £33 basic was probably about £60, £70 a week because we always had big crowds at Hereford, crowd bonus crowds. And we were winning a lot of games. And we got promotion at the end of that season. But a lot of people don't, you know, who watched me in those days, and even the club itself, had no idea about the background because I went there to play as part-time. Then the next season it was full-time, so it was training every day. And we used to, I mean, you imagine this today, you know, with the rules today. But we used to train every morning at Credon Hill, which was the home, is still the home, I think, of the Special Air Services.
Right.
So we used to train on their pitches. You imagine being allowed into a military base now.
Yeah.
But we did, and they had very good sports facilities. That's where we used to train. And every morning, once the cold started and the damp, every morning I was in absolute agony when we were doing the warm-up for the training because the arthritis came back big time.
Yeah.
And I remember I was kind of seen as the club hypochondriac because I had always had something wrong with me, right? And I had one thing wrong with me, but I was explaining it away with other things, I've got a bit of a pull, or I'm a bit tight. No, it was the arthritis.
Right.
And I knew that if I told them what the situation was, then they'd get another goalkeeper. But one of the strange things about the mind is that, first of all, in training, once the warm-up was over and everything started to warm up, it got much easier and I was able to train.
Yeah.
But the thing was, during the games, I was never troubled with it, ever. I never had any pain, any stiffness at all when I was playing games.
Right, just mind over matter.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I mean, it was. But every morning it was agony, and it's quite something when you wake up in the morning and within 2 hours from now you're going to be in agony, and that's 5 days a week, right?
Yeah.
So, but what it did, it triggered in me enormous determination. But at the end of that season, we'd won promotion. Everything was fantastic. We were going up into the next division, and it was all honky-dory. And I was only just 21. So to be playing for a league football team, especially a successful one, at age 20, 21, was, as a goalkeeper, was quite a feat then.
Yeah.
And given the arthritis situation, which had started at Coventry when I was 15, I was very pleased with the way things were going. But there was one morning in the close season when I woke up and I couldn't breathe. Not only couldn't I breathe, I couldn't move anything. Nothing would move. My body was completely rigid. And I thought I was going to die because I couldn't breathe. But obviously it didn't take long because I gasped to breath. I was trying to hit my wife, Linda, to wake her up, but I couldn't move, right? And then when I eventually gasped the breath out, it seemed like every joint in my body was agony. And I went to bed a professional footballer and I woke up never to play again. Right? Well, never to play professionally again.
Yeah.
And that was the end of my career. And that's when John Campkin came back in, because he called me again and asked me what I was going to do now. And I said, I want to be a journalist. Because when I was a kid, my obsession was football and steam trains, but I was also phenomenally interested in journalism. I always used to read papers and stuff, which was not normal for kids of my age.
No.
And I used to read football reports and see how they were laid out, how they were structured. There's a guy called Laurie Simkin, used to work for the Leicester Mercury, and he used to write the Leicester City reports, and I would read them and see how he structured them. And he ended up being my news editor at the Leicester Mercury later, actually, one of the synchronicities of my life. And so John Campkin, because I left school at 15, and in those days, if you wanted to get, well, probably still, if you want to get into journalism, they want to know what degree you've got, right? And I used to say, well, I was on loan at Oxford United for a time. I used to drive past the university in the morning. Is that, didn't seem to matter. And don't start me on education anyway, because I think it's a farce until they can teach basic logic and intelligence. Then it will always be flawed. Yeah. So I was telling him I wanted to be a journalist. And like I say, he worked in journalism himself. And he had a mate who used to be his sports editor on the Daily Mail, who was running a journalism college in Milton Keynes. And I think it was Milton Keynes. It was one of those new towns. No, it wasn't Milton Keynes. It was one of the new towns anyway, in Essex. So I went down there, and the guy put me through the entrance exam for journalists who are sent by newspapers to go on the courses. And I passed that, and he said, "I'll recommend you." So he recommended me to a load of different newspapers. And I got a response from just two. One was the Kent Messenger, and the other one was a paper called the Leicester Advertiser back in my hometown, right? Of all the places in all the world. So I moved back to Leicester, and I went. The Leicester Advertiser was just about read by the people that wrote it, though not every week. It was a tax write-off for the Leicester Mercury.
And their mothers.
Right. And the Leicester Advertiser used to cover every part of Leicestershire where no one lived. There were, we were given different areas of Leicestershire to cover and find news.
Yeah.
And there were more sheep in my patch than there were people. And because it was like you had Wigston and Leicester and Loughborough, all these had their own newspapers in the Leicester Mercury Group. So you weren't going to touch them. So you basically, you had everything that was left. And I remember at the end of the season, or during the season, that we won promotion with Hereford, I would run out into my goal, and the crowd would be shouting, "David Icke, David Icke, David Icke, David Icke," and a matter of weeks later, during the 3-day week of Ted Heath, I sat working for the Leicester Advertiser in a kitchen of a village hall, sitting around where all the councillors, parish council, was sitting around with me around an oven in the kitchen, trying to keep warm, discussing street lamps. And it was quite a come down, to be honest. And it's like, where do I go from here? But again, like I said, in those days I had this real fierce ambition, and what that ambition did was take me through a cycle of different things, which, with hindsight, were all the things I needed to experience and understand for what was coming. And at the end of my career with Hereford, when it was all in the local papers, David Icke can't play anymore and all that, I got an invite to go to Central Television.
Well, see, I grew up in Birmingham, so
with a guy called Gary Newbon.
Yeah, Gary Newbon. Yeah.
I think it was called Central Television.
Yeah, it was Central. Yeah.
But before it was called ATV.
Yeah.
And so it might have still been ATV. I don't know. But anyway, I went there because it was live, and they wanted to interview me about my career ending with a guy called Mike Hendrick, who was a cricketer, who was just about to play for England for the first time. So it was one career ends, one career starts, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I remember walking into the studio. This is right at it's only days before that I've been told I can't play again anymore. And the guy's reading the news live here, and Gary Newbon is pacing up and down, and everyone's going shh, all that stuff. And I looked around and I felt the vibes, and I thought, Icke, son, this is for you, right?
Right.
So I did the interview, and I thought, just like in the days of the big boots, I want to be a professional footballer. I decided I wanted to front Grandstand, which was the big,
of course,
like 5-hour sports show live on a Saturday on the BBC. Yeah. Fronted in those days by a guy called David Coleman and Frank Boff, and later by Desmond Lynam.
Don't mention Frank Boff.
And so, yeah, I worked with Frank Boff a lot, and Coleman and Lynam, and it was, but it was a long way. You know, when you decide I want to be a professional footballer, in those days, I don't know when there is now, but in those days there were 92 league clubs. So if you were going to be a professional goalkeeper, you had 92 places to go for.
Yeah.
The number of people that had fronted Grandstand in its entire history from the 1950s, when I first started watching it, was tiny. I mean, real tiny,
Sure.
almost one-hand tiny.
Yeah.
At the time that I was there, definitely one-hand tiny. So it was like, you've had one disappointment, David. Don't set yourself up for another one, because it ain't going to happen, right? I thought it is. So I remember saying to Gary Newbon, what do you have to do to get into television? He said, well, it usually you start in journalism or newspapers. Okay. So that's when I went to the Leicester Advertiser, that sequence.
Yeah.
And then I eventually had a few jobs in journalism. I ended up on the Leicester Mercury with my news editor was Laurie Simpkin, who I used to read the Leicester reports that he did, Leicester City reports. And then I got a job at BRMB in Birmingham, BRMB Radio, which was great in those days. It was a real laugh, and it was a proper independent radio station.
I remember they had that. It's a goal, wasn't it? That was the.
Yeah,
do you remember that?
Tony Butler.
Yeah, Tony Butler. That's it.
BRMB.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tony Butler. BRMB Sport. Yeah, he was a bloody character.
Yeah.
But I didn't go there as a sports journalist. Like I didn't work for the Leicester Advertiser and all my journalistic career up to this point. I didn't work in sport. I worked in news.
Right.
And so I went to BRMB, and it was hilarious. It was very professional. The newsroom was very professional. Had its own newsroom then. Didn't have a one news bulletin from London going out to all the stations.
Yeah.
They had a proper newsroom,
Yeah.
right? And there was. I remember there was a guy called what was his name? He had a big Brummie accent, and he used to read the news. And I remember once the first line of the news was in Addis Ababa, and he once he got it going, he couldn't stop. It became in Addis Ababa.
Yeah.
So there was so many funny things that happened in that station, with news reading and stuff, and it was real fun. But I had this drive, you know. I wanted to front Grandstand, so if I was going to front Grandstand, I had to get into the BBC. So I applied for a job. I was 2 years at BRMB. I applied for a job at BBC Midlands Today in Birmingham.
Yeah.
And I didn't get it, but I was the second choice. It wasn't an envisioned job. It was described as writing the news, writing scripts for the news, and occasional appearances in Vision. Right.
Okay.
That was actually the job description. And so another guy got it, but I was considered, I'd found out later, to be someone who could have got the job, and therefore the BBC had this rule that if you were considered for the job that you could have done it, and there another job of that kind came available in the same place, within 6 months, then you could automatically be appointed.
Okay.
So I was disappointed I hadn't gotten the BBC, because now I'm like, I need to get into Grandstand. And So I was disappointed. But then a matter of just a few weeks later, I got this letter from the BBC saying you've been appointed, if you want the job still,
Right.
as what they used to call it, a regional journalist.
Yeah.
So I turn up, but I didn't just turn up on the day. I turned up beforehand, before my notice was worked out at BRMB. My spare time was spent in the newsroom at Midlands Today because I wanted to hit the ground running, right?
Yeah.
And as for a few occasional appearances in Vision, I thought, sod that for a game of soldiers. We'll see about that. So I turn up, and what used to happen is that at lunchtime, the newsroom would empty, and they go up to the BBC bar, right? But I noticed that what used to happen is the designated reporters would come in the morning, and they'd get what were called the diary jobs, what they knew was going to happen that day.
Yeah.
They would get sent out to cover these events. And any breaking story they didn't know was coming, well, one of us regional journalists had to cover it, right? And I kind of noticed very quickly that these stories tended to break over the lunch period a lot. So instead of going to the BBC bar, I used to take sandwiches. And I used to sit in an empty newsroom, having me sandwiches, waiting and hoping. And day after day, the producer would stick his head around the door from his office and say, hey, get yourself a camera crew. So-and-so's happened, right? Go and cover this. Mm-hmm. So I started covering these events. They kept dropping in my lap, you know. It's a bit like the goalkeeper getting injured. And I did all right on them. And eventually they gave me a contract as a fully fledged reporter. But I wanted to get to Grandstand. And the first weekend, I worked for the BBC officially in Birmingham. And I got me BBC card so I could go into any BBC premises. That Saturday morning, I was down to London to watch Grandstand go out. It's when I first met Frank Boff. Mm-hmm. And quite a few other people that I actually ended up working with not that long later. So I applied to. Well, I didn't apply actually. There was a guy in London who was editor of a new program. It hadn't been up long, called Newsnight, which is still going, BBC Two, and he used to have sport at the end most nights. And he offered me a job to go to Newsnight. And at the same time, I got offered a job, Synchronicity, back at Central Television, the ITV Midlands show, where it had all started. And Gary Newbon was still there. And I was offered a job as a news presenter with ATV or Central Television. And I turned that down because my thing was, they were offering me a lot more money, but Newsnight was in London, right? That's where Grandstand goes out.
Grandstand was, yeah.
So I went to Newsnight, and I worked there for a while, and then the telephone rang in the office, the Newsnight office for me, and it was a guy called Martin Hopkins. And Martin Hopkins was the producer of Grandstand. And he said, we've been watching you, you know, we're very impressed. And we've got this slot in Grandstand, which Tony Gubber normally does. Tony Gubber, another well-known guy on Grandstand and sport in general in the BBC. He said, but he can't do it for 2 weeks. So would you like to do it? I said casually, oh, yeah, I kind of do that, yeah. And he said, okay, well, I'll have a word with a few people. I'll come back to you, right? So I'm pacing up and down in the bloody office waiting for the call.
Sure, yeah.
And it came back. He came back and he said, okay, you start I think it was 2 weeks hence. So the next week I go down and I watch what Tony Gubba does. So I've got it in my head. And it was a real stressful spot because what happened is a Grandstand obviously live, and Frank Boff was fronting it up. David Coleman did it a few times as well when I was there, but mostly it was Frank Boff. And once the football matches ended, they would go round to various grounds of the main games to get reports. And then they'd come to me, Tony Gubba, before, to get a roundup of all the other football and go through the league tables of, where people were, right?
Yeah.
Now, that was real stressful for this reason. The games had only ended a few minutes earlier. And somehow you had to get together a report, a coherent report with pictures of players who'd scored, plus all where the league tables were. And you had to do that within minutes of the game's finishing.
Yeah.
It was a real pressure job, and it was obviously all live, and it was overwhelmingly ad lib. And you had what they call an open talkback, where you, which you always do in sport, where, you did in those days, where you hear everything that goes on in the gallery going into your ear. So someone's asking for a cup of tea, or someone's shouting at someone because something's been not done or whatever, or someone's talking to Frank Boff while you're talking to the camera, and you're hearing all this stuff, right? And you have to pick out what's relevant to you and what isn't. So anyway, the first week, I just about got through it, and I remember afterwards I could hardly stand up. My legs were like jelly. It was such a pressure job. I've never done it for the first, done it for before. The second week was a story, because what I used to do, I used to have a typewriter, no computers in those days.
No.
And I used to write the stories, write the reports as the games happened and what have you. And then there was always late goals, and so you had pen here and this there and points here and all that stuff. But I'd written it, and then I went to the desk. Frank Boff is here, and I put my earpiece in, and Frank Boff is what's going on with Frank Boff is in there is there's a report going on, a football report on the phone. And I know that when this report's over, he's coming to me. And I looked down, and it was blank. There was no frickin' words there. It was just a blank piece of paper.
Right.
And I go, oh my shit. And there was a guy called John Tidy. John Tidy ran all the graphics on Grandstand, all the football result graphics and all the different graphics, horse racing graphics. He ran the whole thing, right? And he could see I was, shall I say, under pressure. And he came over. He says, "What's up?" I said, "I've lost my freaking script." And he walks over to where my desk was. And this report is coming to an end, right? And he came over. He said, "Is this what you want?" And it was the script. So I put it down. Now, all nerves, everything has gone, because I've just got out of jail seconds before this report ended in the most monumental fashion. And so I'm looking at it, and I thought, oh my God, phew. And he says, "And now for the rest of the football, here's David Icke." And I was off. And I was so relieved. I delivered it with absolute confidence and assurance. No nerves, nothing, because I thought, well, it can't get much worse. It can't get much worse than it would have got if John Tidy hadn't found my script. And after I'd done it, Frank Boff leaned over and said, "You read that very well." I thought, well, if you only knew what had just bloody happened, Frank, you'd realise why, you know. And then I got the job. They gave me the job of doing that every week.
In uncertain times, one asset continues to rise, and that's gold. More than just a precious metal, gold is a globally recognized Tier 1 asset with no counterparty risk. Its history of preserving value during turbulent periods makes it a trusted store of wealth, and with central banks and nation-states buying record vaults, it's clear gold is more than an investment, it's financial security. Secure yours today with Knights Bullion. Visit knightsbullion.com or call 01789 266 595.
And then I went to the World Cup in 1982 in Spain when I was with the Irish team. And I was with the Irish team because I was still working for Newsnight, but they wanted a reporter to be with the Irish team and do reports about the Irish team, the Northern Ireland team. Yeah, I'm talking about. But Martin O'Neill was playing, and it was a real proper Irish team. It was, and there was a guy called Billy Bingham who was the manager. Who he would do anything as long as there was a fee in it.
Norman Whiteside, would he have been playing?
Yeah, Norman Whiteside made his debut in that World Cup. Okay. And when I was there, right?
All right.
And Norman Whiteside, who's now a good talker.
Is he?
He went into physiotherapy and stuff, I think, and he's a good talker, a good chatter. Then, when he was 17, right? You know when there's a challenging interview, when the questions get longer than the answers, right? So it was a bit of a nightmare. But anyway, the Irish team weren't supposed to do well, and I was working for Newsnight, but they said, can we second him for 3 weeks to, so I did. But the Irish team did fantastically well, and they played Spain, the home team, in Valencia. And they won 1-0, and it was a major story of the World Cup. And of course, my reports were very well used because of what was happening with Northern Ireland. And I remember that what happened is we're in Valencia, and we're in a nice hotel right next to the beach, the BBC were there, ITV were there. Ron Atkinson, who was the big pundit for ITV in those days, who I played at Oxford United on loan when he was the club captain.
Oh, okay.
So me and Ron go back a long way in that sense.
He was Villa, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
manager.
He was Villa manager, he was Manchester United manager.
Of course he was. Yeah.
And he was West Brom manager, and he was so badly destroyed by the whole Ron's a racist guy because of one remark he made off mic, which was recorded. That. Yeah, it destroyed his career. And I think it's desperately sad because Ron Atkinson was not a racist, is not a racist. And, all the people like, what's his name, that Arsenal player who's a pundit now.
Oh, what, the black guy?
What's his name?
Wright. Ian Wright?
Yeah, Ian Wright, yeah. He picked it up and went with it and all that stuff.
Yeah, I vaguely remember all that.
Yeah, it was absolutely disgusting. Ron Atkinson was the guy who basically gave black players the highest profile they'd ever had when he was at West Brom. They had the 3
Remy
degrees.
Moses?
Remy Moses. Well, yeah.
Dragging some of these out were subconscious.
Just to see the way his career was destroyed was very sad to me. From having worked with him here and there, having had conversations with him when he was a pundit at ITV and I was working with the BBC. No way the guy was a racist, and yet his career was destroyed by actually racists, people who see race when I see people, they see race. You know what I mean? This is why you get some of the most racist people you'll ever meet are anti-racists or claim to be. Yeah, because they're obsessed with race.
Same with Antifa, isn't it?
Yeah,
the most fascistic mindset you can come across.
Yeah, exactly. It's just an inversion.
Yeah.
So anyway, things went ever so well in that World Cup, but I do remember this story. We were in this hotel in Valencia. It was very nice on the beach, and this was the group games. It's when they beat Spain 1-0, and it was fantastic, and everyone was really up for it. And they went to the second stage of the World Cup, and they were located in Madrid, And what had happened is the Irish football official guy had been sent out to Spain before the World Cup to look for hotels for the team and to suss them out that they were adequate, right?
Right.
So he knows they're going to be in Valencia because they're in the first stage, right?
Yeah.
So he checks that hotel out. But he don't bother with the second one because he thinks, well, we're not gonna qualify for the second stage, so there's no bloody point.
Yeah, of course.
And it was a hole, right? We get to, I wasn't in that hotel, I was with the BBC, in a much nicer one, actually.
Yeah.
But the one the Irish players went in was shocking. It was an airport come and go hotel. It wasn't a place, there was a swimming pool, but it was in the basement and it was kind of green looking. And I remember we had to go off to a public area, massive numbers of people, to so they could go in the pool and stuff, a public pool, and it was and there was nowhere to go, so they were sat in their rooms. There was no reception area where you could sit. There was no lounge or anything. It was terrible, and the whole atmosphere went.
Okay, yeah.
And they went out, and they, what would have happened if that had not?
That guy had found a decent hotel.
Yeah, what would have happened if that had happened? Who knows? But that's what happened. But anyway, the BBC Sports Department were impressed with what I did on that, and they offered me a job full time. And eventually, I fronted up Grandstand, what they called Sunday grandstands in those days, because they had them on Sundays as well. But to be honest, I was living in a place called Oakley in Buckinghamshire at the time, which was as near to London as I could afford, because London prices were, off the Richter scale. It was about an hour's drive or so into London. And I remember driving into Television Centre on the morning of my first Grandstand. And there were tears running down my face. And it wasn't because I was going to present a sports show, nothing to do with that. It was the realization that the real depth of losing my football career, I decided this is what I want to do, and I was just driving in to do it, right? But I tell you what happened is that once I'd done it, everything kind of changed. I wasn't bothered anymore.
Okay, that's interesting.
And I kind of lost, I lost interest. I still worked for them for years after that, and still did the best I could. The only way I know, but there was the drive had gone, and it was kind of lifted a bit. Well, it was lifted a lot actually, because I then get a call from the sports department, BBC in Manchester, which did all the snooker.
Yeah.
And of course, the snooker at that time had just gone through the roof.
Yeah.
It had gone from just a pub game and real low profile, and suddenly it had become, thanks to a guy called Nick Hunter, who was the producer there, it had gone through the stratosphere. Mm-hmm. And he asked me if I would go up and present the World Championship. Well, first of all, a championship in London at at Wembley. And then the Wembley Conference Centre, it was called. It's not there anymore. And then the World Championships. And I did that for a few years. And the audiences were absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
You'd go on straight after the 9 o'clock news and prime time. And I used to do a show from the World Championship, started about 10 o'clock in the morning, and I went through to 5 o'clock live the whole time. Mm-hmm. And David Vine was the other guy that
Yeah.
presented them, the snooker. He'd done it for years before me,
Yeah.
and it was my Indian summer, my swan song, if you like, because I started to get involved with the Green Party. As my interest in television had started to wane, although the snooker was different, I really loved that. And
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it, but the rest of it started to wane.
Was it a kind of a deep sense that something wasn't quite right about it, or was it just something that you couldn't really put your finger on?
Well, there was a few things. I'd achieved what I set out to achieve,
Yeah.
and the only thing I could do then was achieve it more and more.
Yeah.
And the drive had gone.
Yeah.
The ambition had gone, and also, you were dealing with people in the BBC Sports Department at the time who would have been a psychiatrist's life's work.
Sure.
I mean, they were, a lot of them were characters who were acquired tastes, shall we say, and they thought the world began and ended with the BBC Sports Department, which I didn't.
Yeah.
So in the end, what would happen?
Any glimpses of sort of later how you see that organisation now? Any kind of gut feeling of disquiet, or was it just a vague sort of?
Well,
in the sense that those people did. There was something not quite right, perhaps, about the people that it attracted in terms of wanting fame
the BBC used to be people what I used to call BBC people. I remember when I joined the BBC Sports Department, and I was chatting to someone, and he said, "Oh, if you ever go in the bar at lunchtime at Kensington House." Kensington House was a building; it didn't have studios in it, but
yeah,
did it have studios in it? I don't think it did. But it's where the sports department was run from. And they said, don't go to the toilet, because when you go to the toilet, they'll demolish you behind your back, right?
Right. So
I thought, well, this is strange. Anyway, I only once in my life, because I did all my work at home, basically, on the Isle of Wight, and then came to do the programmes. Only once was I in the BBC bar at lunchtime at Kensington House, and they were all there having a good sup.
Yeah.
And I thought, I've got to avoid going to the toilet. But what I did was I watched other people go to the toilet.
Right.
And then I watched them get demolished while they were gone. Right.
Yeah.
Collectively. And I thought, this is ridiculous, So it was not an atmosphere that I really wanted to work in. And when I got the call from Manchester for the snooker and everything, then I was delighted. I jumped at it because they were really nice people in Manchester, Nick Hunter and etc.
Yeah.
The team around him have completely different mentalities. But I was getting involved in the Green Party more and more, and I was thinking about going into politics because I was seeing places that I knew being concreted over and inappropriate development, which had no sympathy in its design with that which had been there a long time, And I started getting involved in the Green Party, which had just changed its name to the Green Party from the Ecology Party. Mm. And it was kind of a story that captures my life, really, from the point of view of synchronicity and things happening very fast and things happening by apparent coincidental chance.
Yeah.
I wrote to the Green Party and I asked them if there was a local branch. I was on the Isle of Wight, and I'd never heard of a Green Party on the Isle of Wight. but I wanted to check that there wasn't anybody, any activists there. And they came back and said, no, there's no Green Party on the Isle of Wight. Why don't you start one? Mm-hmm. So I did. We started a Green Party on the Isle of Wight. And about 2 weeks after and this is only a very short time after I joined the Green Party. And my interest was not, global warming and all that stuff, which was very, very, very much in the background then.
Yeah.
Very, very hardly talked about.
Was it the ozone layer and
and it was pollution and deforestation, and it was all that stuff.
Well, decent stuff actually. Deforestation, pollution.
Well, that's that's why
the real stuff,
unfortunately, what's happened is global warming, climate change, the hoax has so mesmerized the Green movement that it's forgotten about all these other areas.
Sure.
Right? So, but they were the ones that motivated me to get involved. And so anyway, I joined the Green Party, and very quickly I started a Green Party on the Isle of Wight. So we're talking a matter of weeks. And then we got this letter from the regional Green Party in Winchester, in Hampshire, saying, welcome to the southern region area of the Green Party. And we're having a meeting in Winchester. It was about a week later. Would you like to send representatives, right? So I thought, well, might as well go along, see what's going on. So I went along with one or two other people from the Isle of Wight Green Party, and we went to this meeting in Winchester. And at the end, where they're naval contemplated at a higher level this time, they said, our representative on National Green Party Council is stepping down at this meeting. Could we have proposals for someone to replace him? Well, no one volunteered.
Right.
So I said, well, we better have someone. I said, I'll do it. So they had a vote. I was the only person, and two people voted against me, funny enough. And so now I've just joined the Green Party. I've just started the Isle of Wight Green Party. Now I'm the regional representative for the southern region on Green Party Council, right?
Yeah.
So I said to the lady, the chair lady afterwards, so what does that mean? What have I just volunteered for? She said, oh, you represented us on National Party Council, right? She says, there's a meeting in another 2 weeks. So I go up to this building. It was near Regent's Park in London. And there's all these people sitting around the table who are the National Council of the Green Party. So I sat there and I listened to it. And it weren't going anywhere. And just before lunchtime, the chairperson, bloke this time, said, we need some speakers for to talk to the media for the next year, right? And, well, talk to the media. There was no media. They weren't interested in the Green Party, right? So can we have, he said, your proposals for people and who wants to put themselves forward after lunch. So I'm sat there with me salad at lunch, and this guy came up to me who'd been in the Green Party quite a while, I think. And he said, you're on telly, aren't you? I said, yeah. He said, you'd be confident in the media, wouldn't you? I said, well, I probably would, yeah. He said, well, if you put your name forward, I'll second you, right? So by 5 o'clock that afternoon, I'm now a national speaker for the British Green Party, having just joined the sodding thing, right? And what happened, again, synchronicity, is apart from The Guardian and The Independent, nobody turned up at Green Party conferences, right? There was a man and a dog when the dog could be bothered. You got no coverage or anything.
Yeah.
But when I became national spokesman for the Green Party with another lady, nothing to do with me, by the way, suddenly things start to change. There's a lot of environmental documentaries on mainstream television about pollution, destruction of the environment. And it started to build. And it led up to the European elections of 1989, I think it was, 1989. And, the European elections were a time when people basically did their protest vote, if you like. They would vote for another party often.
Yeah.
Because they didn't really take it seriously.
Yeah.
Well, they shouldn't take it seriously, actually, because it's run from Brussels, not Strasbourg. And the European Parliament is just an excuse to say, oh, it's a democratic organization. It's not. Anyway, this built up. And in the European elections in the summer of 1989, I think it was, the Green Party got its biggest vote ever, 2 million votes. And suddenly I'm in the news. I'm on the BBC News talking about the Green Party. The BBC News, I work with it, doing the sport every weekend, because I started doing sport for them as well. And anyway, I think the Liberal Democrats, who the Green Party were challenging, got in touch with the BBC and complained that I was getting promoted by appearing on BBC programs as a sports presenter. Ian Rush scored for Liverpool today was apparently incompatible with saying that the economic system was destroying the environment. And so they sacked me. And funnily enough, when I say they sacked me, they didn't renew my contract.
Yeah.
And I was the youngest presenter in the sports department by a mile, because most of the other presenters and commentators in the BBC sports department were the same people that I used to watch as a kid on television. They were David Coleman, they were Frank Boff, they were Harry Carpenter, who did the boxing. They were Peter O'Sullivan, who did the racing. All the greats of sports broadcasting, I actually worked with. It was an absolute freaking privilege to do so. And Desmond Lynam came in later. But so I left the BBC, and I had no other form of income. But I've always lived below my means. And so I had a bit to get me by.
Yeah.
Good job I did, because I didn't earn anything for well over a year. And you'd think I would be gutted that this career in television had ended, but I wasn't. I was relieved, because by this time I'd had enough. I'd had enough of the vacuous world of television.
Right.
You were brilliant, darling. What was I like, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Someone once said, a guy I worked with at the BBC in the Midlands, he said, at the BBC, they get so confused, they'd stab each other in the chest. It was that kind of atmosphere.
Yeah.
And so I was delighted, but I didn't know what I was going to do. And by this time, some very strange things were happening to me. And my focus was moving way away from the BBC into this other area that life was taking me into.
Yeah. So when you say strange things, what were they?
Well, in the year 1989, I started, when we had this big election success, I was working with the BBC, I was working for the Green Party. But it became a kind of a regular thing that when I was in a room alone, it didn't seem like I was alone.
Okay.
So it was like there was a presence there. And this was all new to me at the time, and I didn't know what was going on, but it just increased and increased and increased through that year, and it became more and more tangible.
And how did that make you feel? Was it disconcerting, or
Well,
did you
I thought it was a bit strange, but you know, I've always been open to what people call the paranormal.
Okay.
You know, from when I was a kid, I rejected religion, but I also rejected the idea from scientific, alleged scientific orthodoxy that basically we are a cosmic accident that has some form of consciousness for a few years and then ceases to exist. I just thought that was hysterical. On the basis of the evidence, ludicrous. Anyway,
yeah.
I didn't focus upon, okay, so what's the story then? I just rejected those two things all the way through my life, from when I was a kid. So the idea that there was a presence in the room didn't faze me in terms of, well, it can't happen. I just thought, well, I'm feeling it.
Yeah.
And it got more and more tangible until it was March of 1990. And I'd just done a program for the BBC at Television Centre in Shepherd's Bush, London. And I went to a hotel just down the road called the Kensington Hilton. And I went into the room and I sat on the side of the bed. And empty room, apparently. But this presence was so tangible that you couldn't deny it. And I spoke out into the room. I said, look, if there's something there, would you please contact me, because you're driving me up the wall. A few days later, I'm on the Isle of Wight in Ryde, where I live, and there's I don't know whether it's still there now, but it was there until very recently, was a newsagent shop on the seafront. And I was with Gareth, my son, who's, big strapping adult now, but he was a little boy in those days, 1990. I mean, we're talking 35 years ago.
Yeah.
And we were going to go down the seafront where there's a little cafe next to this newsagent shop. So we walked down there and went to the cafe. The cafe was packed. It wasn't very big anyway. And so we walked out. I said, "Come on, we'll go in the town." And as I walked out, because there's a railway station there on the seafront, a railway worker came up to me and started talking to me about football, because I think Southampton, just across the way, were playing at the FA Cup semi-final, something like that day. When we finished the conversation, I realised Gareth wasn't there. So I knew where he would be. He would be in the newsagent shop, because they sold steam train books there. Steam train books about Isle of Wight railways. And we, as a family, we like steam trains. I don't know where they get it from, but there you go.
Yeah.
And so I walk into the newsagent, stood at the door, and he's standing there, Gaz, with the book open. And I said to him, "Come on, Gaz, we'll go up into the town and get some lunch." And as I said that, it was like the atmosphere around me changed. What I would say now, the electromagnetic field changed. And it was like there was a burning in my feet, like magnets pulling my feet down. And I can't say it was a voice, but it was a very strong thought form went through my mind, which said, "Go and look at the books on the far side." And of course, all this is new to me. I don't know, I've never experienced anything like this before. So I walked across slowly, bewildered, to these books. And one of the reasons I was bewildered is I knew that bookshop very well, that newsagent shop very well.
Yeah.
They sold Mills and Boon,
Yeah.
Barbara Cartland romantic novels for people in the deck chairs on the beach. Why would I want to go there? But in among the Mills and Boon and the Barbara Cartland was this one book called Mind to Mind with a woman's face on the front called Betty Shine. And I picked it up because it was different, and I turned it over and I read the blurb and I saw the word psychic. Betty Shine was a professional psychic, and this was her autobiography. So I bought it because I thought, as soon as I saw the word psychic and flipped through it, I thought, I wonder if this lady would pick up what's happening around me. So I contact her and I go to see her, read the book in 24 hours. And I didn't tell her anything. I didn't tell her what was happening to me, nothing. All I said to her, because she used to do the kind of hands-on energy healing.
Yeah.
So I said to her, I've got arthritis. Maybe your healing might help. Can I come and see you? That's all she knew. And I certainly hadn't told anyone else about it. So outside my family, and so I went to see her. And I went the first time, went the second time. We had a nice chat about the paranormal and other dimensions and things, which I found fascinating, always have. And then I went the third time, and I'm sitting on this medical type bench in her front room. And she's doing the healing around my left knee, where my arthritis started, actually. And suddenly I feel like a spider's web on my face, which I had no idea what that was, but now obviously it's an electromagnetic field. And I'd read in her book that when other dimensions are trying to lock into you, you sometimes feel like a spider's web on your face.
Okay.
So I felt that, and my initial reaction was, this is what I read in her book. I said nothing to her. And about 10 seconds, 15 seconds, whatever later, she reels her head back and says, my God, I've got to close my eyes for this one. This is powerful, right? So I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? And she starts telling me, and the same happened the following week, that I was going to go out on a world stage and reveal great secrets. That, quote, one man cannot change the world, but one man can communicate the message that will change the world.
Yeah.
That I was going to be led to knowledge, and at other times knowledge would be put directly into my mind, and I would think, where did that come from?
Yeah.
And lots of other things, all of which have happened. And so I left after I saw her 4 times. I left after the second time. The last 2 times was when this communications happened. And again, I left and went off to do a program with the BBC before they sacked me. And, I should have, from a 5 cents point of view, have gone, you're having a bloody laugh, lady, right? Me, I do the snooker. What do you mean, great secrets? But something here said, go for it, go for it, go for it, go for it. And I did. And just after that, the BBC didn't renew the contract. So I was able to pursue this that I wouldn't have been able to in the same way, and I still work for the BBC.
Sure, yeah.
And I ended up writing a book called Truth Vibrations, which I wrote during 1990. And it was basically a book about what was happening to me, not that I understood at the time. And it went off to the printers in late 1990 and was going to come out in May the 8th, I think it was, or something like that, May 1991. And after the book went to the printers, I got this feeling that I had to go to Peru. And I knew nothing about Peru. I'd seen them play in the World Cup a few times, but I'd never had any experience of Peru. And what would happen is Peru kept coming to me. I'd turn the telly on and it would be something about Peru. I'd walk down the street in Ryde past the travel agent and there'd be a Peru travel display. Yeah. What? So I get on a plane to Peru, not knowing why. And of course, by this time I've gone, this is February 1991. By this time I've gone 8 months without any income. So, getting on a plane to Peru was not something you would normally do.
And how's your family? So you've got 2 kids at this point, or
no? I had
just Gareth.
Kerry and Gareth then, and what happened was I got on the plane and I went, and I didn't know why I was going. So we land. It was very early, maybe about 5 o'clock in Lima, Peru. And so I walk into the baggage area, again, not knowing what the hell I'm going to do next, or why I'm there. And it was 5 o'clock in the morning, but the bloody airport was chocker. And suddenly through this crowd of people came this bloke. And he said, "Where you go?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "You don't know? Where you go?" And I looked up at the departure lounge and I saw a plane going to Cuzco at 6 o'clock, around 6 o'clock. So I said to him, "Cuzco." He said, "You have ticket?" I said, "No." He said, "You have hotel?" I said, "No." He said, "I get you ticket and I get you hotel." Obviously, he's on a commission. So he goes off, and I follow him, and he gets me this hotel, which was by the way, and he gets me this ticket. So there's this massive queue for the flight to Cuzco to check in, and being English, I went to the back of the queue, right?
Yeah.
And the guy said, no, follow me. And we walked right down the queue, and he plonks my ticket on the desk of the check-in guy. Obviously, he knows the bloke. But he starts checking me in. And so less than an hour after arriving in Peru and Lima, I'm walking across the tarmac to get on this plane to Cuzco. So I then go on this plane and I go to this hotel, and I sat on the side of the bed thinking, what now? Mm-hmm. And what had happened is I'd met this lady who said that she had a friend who was in Cuzco, and I should give her a call if I go there. So I called the number, and it turns out she's a travel agent. She organizes tours of Peru, right, this woman. Mm-hmm. So I went round to see her, and she was just going off somewhere else. So she was disappearing just after she met me on a plane somewhere. But she says, what you need is you need a guide. You need a Peruvian guide. She said, I've got just the guy for you. So she gets this Peruvian guide. And the next morning, when we're going to go off to Machu Picchu or wherever we're going, I walk into this guy's house. Door was open. And I walk through, and he's sleeping on the floor. And he's got one of these Peruvian hats on with a pull-down thing. Mm. And he opens his eyes, and he doesn't say, hello, good morning. He's just said to me, do you have any dreams last night? And I said, well, yeah. I said, I had a real vivid dream that one of my 2 middle front teeth had fallen out.
Yeah.
He said, that's usually symbolic of your father or grandfather dying. Well, the next time I got a call out of Peru, my father had died back in England, right?
Wow.
At that time. So we go off around Peru, and every day I'm saying, this is where I I want to go. And he was saying that's not possible. And we end up there. And it was a kind of a sequence that happened day after day.
Yeah.
But eventually he books us into a hotel in a place called Puno on Lake Titicaca, the so-called highest navigable lake in the world. And the hotel that he booked us in was called the Siyustani. And it was called that because that's the name of an Inca site. They call it a burial site. I mean, anytime the ancients put stones on top of each other, it was a burial site, wasn't it? And there's pictures of Siyustani all over the hotel, obviously, for obvious reasons. And I'm standing there looking at these pictures, and something's saying to me, come, you need to go to me, you need to go here, you need to go here, you need to go here. So I said to the guide, I said, I want to go to Siyustani. Usual story, he said, not possible. So we end up there. But in ending up there, I have to pay this this guy who runs, they call them taxis, but actually they're like minibuses.
Yeah.
And I pay him. And a lot of money. I think the guide was on a cut. Because they said, oh no, there's no buses there this time of year, you know, all that stuff. So anyway, we go. And we go to Siyustani, and it was a beautiful place. You know, the Inca ruins and what have you. And there was the distant mountains, and there was a lake, and it was lovely. And I walked around it for about an hour. But my urge to go there was not matched by my experience. So I was quite disappointed when I went back to the minibus thing.
Yeah.
To go back to Puno. And I'm sat there like looking out of the window, daydreaming, as I normally do, as they drove down the road out of Siyustani, past the hills on the way to Puno. A few minutes down the road, I'm looking out the window, and I'm looking at this hill, and all I can hear in my head is, come to me, come to me, come to me. Mm-hmm. And I told the guy to stop the bus, and I said, I want to be a few minutes, I'm going up that hill. And so I walked up, and there was loads of stones there. And I go to the middle of these stones, and it was like a repeat of what happened in the newsagent's shop, only much more powerful.
Right.
Where my feet started to burn and get pulled down to the ground. And there was like a drill going in the top of my head, going down through my feet. There was another flow coming the other way. And then my arms went up like that, without me making a decision to do it. And I just heard this kind of voice, real strong thought form in my head, saying they'll be talking about this 100 years from now. And then it said something that sounded totally bizarre. It will be over when you feel the rain. Now, I'm looking up at a clear blue Peruvian sky and the sun. I had a red nose from the sun and everything. And I'm hearing, it will be over when you feel the rain. It sounded utterly bizarre. And what was happening is this energy was building up. And I started kind of shaking a bit. And then it really built up and built up and built up, this energy going through me. And it was like, you know, when you drive a car and you don't remember where the last few miles, your subconscious has been driving the car. It was like that. You'd have periods of not being aware of the world around you, and then you'd have periods when you'd come back and you'd be aware of it. And one of the times I became aware of it again, I noticed that over the distant mountains, there was a light gray mist. And I watched it happened ever so quick. It got darker. And suddenly this rainstorm came out of the distant mountains, and it came towards me, and very quickly. And, you know, they talk in weather forecasting about a front. Well, this was a front. It was like a straight line And the closer it got to me, I could see it was stair rod rain. I've described it as like pulling curtains across the sky. Mm-hmm. And I watched it moving towards me, this stair rod rain, almost well, if you put it in a B movie, they'd say that's far-fetched, that's ridiculous. Yeah. But it happened. And then by this time, my body's shaking like crazy. And then the rain hit me. I was soaked immediately. And the energy stopped. My legs are like Bambi then. And my shoulders, which I couldn't feel, were now really painful. And what had happened is just before I went to Peru, I'd gone to Glastonbury in Wiltshire. Mm-hmm. And no, Somerset. Glastonbury's in Somerset. And I'd gone in this, because I money was really tight. And I'd gone in this crystal shop just to browse, really.
Had you been drawn there, or just?
Yeah, well, you walk around Glastonbury, you're going to find a crystal shop.
No, to Glastonbury itself. Are there any reason you've gone to Glastonbury?
Oh yeah, you were drawn to Glastonbury because of its reputation, really. Yeah. I mean, these are early days when you're trying to work out what's happening to you.
Sure.
So I'll go into this crystal shop, and I was looking at this enormous quartz crystal. It's about that big. And I thought, oh, that's interesting and stuff. And I was looking at some others. And suddenly the guy behind the counter, obviously the owner of the shop, he walks round and he picks up this big crystal. And he said, I think you need that. And I said, well, sorry, mate, I can't afford that. He said, no, have it, take it, right? And so I took it to Peru. Brazil's another story. Mm-hmm. I took it to Peru, and I had it in my bag, because what happened after this experience is that energy was pouring out of my feet, was pouring out of my hands, was pouring out of my feet so much I couldn't sleep that night. When I got down to the bus, I had this crystal in my bag, and I put it in my hands to try to take the energy out. And something changed then, shall we say, and I came back to England, and all hell broke loose, really. It started to, be seen that this Icke guy off the telly, or once off the telly, had gone completely bonkers. And how can I describe it? It lasted for 3 months. What happened after that experience on the hill in Siustani is that it was like a bubble had burst. Imagine you're living your life in a bubble, and all your information is basically coming out of the bubble, within the bubble. And then someone burst the bubble. And then suddenly information of a very different kind is pouring into your mind. And I've described it as like pressing too many keys on a computer.
Yeah.
Where the computer freezes. I can't process this information. Thank you. I'm freezing. I'll see you later.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it was like. And for 3 months, I didn't know where I was, what the hell was going on.
Well, I heard you say it was like you didn't know what planet you were on.
No. And in the middle of it, I went on a thing called The Wogan Show, because I was in all the papers. Ike's gone mad. Well, after The Wogan Show, it got completely, it just got so extraordinarily abusive, and in terms of ridicule.
Yeah.
And then after about 3 months, it was like the computer unfroze. And I was David again. And
how did that happen? Was that something that you were conscious of trying to, I need to work this out, this is too confusing, or did it just sort of naturally dissipate?
It just happened. It was like, shh. And people were saying to me, who I knew, they say, well, I thought you'd gone mad, mate. You seem like the bloke I used to know. And I did seem outwardly, because I was David again.
Yeah.
But I wasn't, because I was seeing the world in a completely different way.
Yeah.
And the whole, the Betty Shine quote message, which she said she was getting from some figure she could see in her mind in another dimension of reality, about we will lead him to knowledge, he'll be led to knowledge, and at other times knowledge will be put directly into his mind and he'll wonder where it came from. Well, that happened because the moment I left Betty Shine's front room, my life became this synchronistic series of endless coincidences that were putting in front of me personal experiences, books, documents, people, whistleblowers, all different kinds of people who were handing me puzzle pieces in a jigsaw. And it was coming to me almost in an order. It was difficult to work it out to start with, but then it really dropped into an order where you were almost given the pieces in a way that you knew where they went,
right?
Because of what had gone before. And so that happened for about 2 years, where information would be put into my mind. And it's gone on ever since, but it's been replaced by something else now as the dominant theme. I would, for 2 years, see this synchronicity of information that was coming to me. And I would conclude from that information what was going on. And then there was a change where I would know what was going on, and then the information supporting that would follow in terms of tangible detail.
Okay. That's
And
interesting.
that's gone on ever since.
Because the question is, if we get channeled information, or one gets channeled information, how do we trust that information? So that shifted then from you just receiving information to, you say you then knew, and that just backed it up, which is a different, I presume that's quite a different thing, isn't it?
Well,
so that knowing is a connection to the greater reality. Is that what you?
Yeah, well, it's a connection to that level that does know. You see, if you look at how the brain works, it processes information through a sequence that leads to a conclusion. But if you think about intuitive knowing, it's not a sequence. You just know.
Yeah.
And you get the whole package in one go.
Yeah.
It's not like you have to work it out.
Yeah.
The brain has to work it out because it doesn't know at that level. And the more you open your mind and expand your awareness deeper and deeper into the infinite field of awareness, the more you do know rather than have to work it out. But of course, it's no good me coming to conclusions of this is what's going on, and then saying, well, this is what's going on. I mean, because people will go, well, where's your bloody evidence, mate?
Yep. Yeah.
So it's a two-way thing. You get what's going on in like the panorama, and then the detail follows in tangible detail. And that's what's gone on ever since.
Right.
I mean, about, a few years ago now, I picked up the theme of Elon Musk. And I've been tracking him on the basis of, I could see that he was part of the whole conspiracy. And then he buys Twitter and becomes this god of the alternative media. And, the tangible detail starts to come about what the game really is and why he's doing what he's doing. But I got that he was part of it a long time ago.
Okay.
Tune in next week, Christmas Eve, for the second half, where David talks about Musk, Trump, soul, spirit, reincarnation, the Matrix, and you get to see my finished painting as well.
Join us for the Resistance Podcast Live, 19th of December at Shoreham by Sea. Katie Joe from Hope Sussex will be interviewing Richard Vobes, and music from fabulous freedom band Victorious. If you would like to attend, it will be taking place at the Royal George, Upper Shoreham Road, Shoreham by Sea, BN436TA. Hope to see you there.